Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Naveen Girishankar. I'm the president of the Economic Security and Technology Department at CSIS. Welcome to this conversation on the strategic partnership between U.S. and India with two of our nation's leading voices on this topic. Allow me a moment of introduction. Our department is focused on how to promote the economic dynamism and technology advantages that are essential to our long-term security and growth. And we are fortunate that we've had, over the last 18 months or so, as we stood up the department, the India Chair, led by Rick Rosso, as a central component of our program. And part of that is because the recognition that American economic security depends very much on the strategic partnership between the U.S. and India. And so Rick, over the many years, has built a program second to none in terms of its understanding of what's happening in India, what's happening in the U.S.-India relationship, not only at the central level in India, but also at the state level. Really phenomenal. A scorecard that Indian policymakers are paying attention to in terms of policy reforms, and also leaders here in the United States. And so I just wanted to underscore that today's conversation really builds on really decades of work that Rick and his team have undertaken. We're really fortunate to have two very, very important national voices on the U.S.-India relationship with us. Representative Rich McCormick, representing the 6th and now 7th Congressional District from Georgia, and he also co-chairs the Congressional Caucus on India and Indian Americans. Of course, we have Congressman Ami Bera from California, 6th Congressional District, the longest-serving Indian American in Congress. Really delighted that both of them come here to share their thoughts. This is a relationship that, if you pay attention to the vicissitudes of what's happening day to day, trade talks, this, that, and the other, sometimes you miss the big picture on what is the timeless and now universal aspect of the U.S.-India relationship, which is two countries that believe in the resourcefulness of free people, the importance of science and technology, the importance of entrepreneurship and trade and investment. And so we're going to hear a lot more about that today. And I will just say, on a personal note, I'm really excited about this conversation. My parents came here almost 60 years ago, in the beginning, late 60s, early 70s. And one of the things that I've taken to heart is the American innovation system is the largest and most dynamic in the history of the world. And I'm proud that Indian Americans have been important contributors to it, and they continue to be so. And I think we'll hear more about that today. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Rick, and really warm welcome to both the congressmen. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Well, let me start with Congressman McCormick. I think it was a little over a year ago you took over as co-chair of the House Caucus on India and Indian Americans. Got to hear a bit of this in the back room before coming out, but what sort of attracted you and pulled you in the direction about taking this important leadership role in this important relationship?
Well, as you guys probably realize, there's a reason for my great success in medicine and everything. I am 2% Indian. I just want to throw out there right now. I did my genetics. It's how I made it through medical school. We have 14% Indian diaspora in my district. It's the wealthiest Republican district in America by median income. And a large part of that is because it is the wealthiest and most successful demographic in America. Likewise, we have a large Korean diaspora. We have about 40% minorities. It is an extremely conservative district, especially financially. And there is no more important friend that we're going to need for the future of not just for the United States and India, but for the entire stability of the world than India. If you consider about the regional security of the Chinese influence of that sphere, 70% of the trade that goes through that straits there with Taiwan, the commonality we have in the way we look at economics and freedom and advancement of a people. We can literally, you have the oldest democracy and the largest democracy. If they unite, which will be two of the three biggest economies in the world in short order, and with an expanding economy of about 8% per year, we could literally usher in a new generation of peace that could last 100 years if we do this right. Conversely, if we do it wrong, it could be catastrophic for us. If they start joining up with Russia and China, that will put everything out of balance for us, and it would be devastating for the future of our relationship as well as for the world, in my opinion.
Congressman Bera, I mean, I know you've got personal reasons as well to be so deeply engaged in India across these many years, but when you think about, today and in the future, what keeps you motivated to keep driving this relationship and be a leader as much as you have over time?
Yeah, I'm 100% Indian by nationality. What's super interesting, what makes America such a great place is my district's 75% Caucasian. It's not an Indian American. Led maybe 8% AAPI. So the beauty of it is you got the Indian guy in the Caucasian district and the Caucasian guy in the demographically diverse district. What keeps me engaged, for 3 decades, if you go back to the Clinton administration, through the Bush administration, through Obama, to Trump 1.0, to Biden, India's been very key to our whole Indo-Pacific strategy. We've seen this rising nation. We've seen this rising economy. As Rich pointed out, largest democracy in the world. So our interests align, and this has not been Democratic or Republican. The caucus is one of the largest caucuses on the Hill. And we've got to get this right. Rich alluded to the world's changing. The framework we put in the United States post-World War II through the Cold War, through the post-Cold War era, that's different today. We know clearly who our adversary is in Beijing. That's going to be the leading competition in the world. We're going to create new structures based on like values: democracy, free markets, entrepreneurship. China is a very different country with a different model. We don't have to guess what Xi Jinping wants to do. He tells us. So it's incredibly important, particularly for stability, not just in the Indo-Pacific region. I mean, India, I think it is the fastest growing economy in the world right now, is going to be key here. So we had just put a resolution together this past fall. Rich was a co-sponsor of it, very strongly bipartisan, Joe Wilson and I, to signal that as a different branch of government, nothing's changed in how Congress sees the importance of this relationship. The president sometimes may say a few things that are different, but he has a different diplomatic style.
Yeah. I wonder if you can comment on that as well, Congressman McCormick. I mean, sitting in the India lane all the time, you hear this is a bipartisan relationship. Is that relative? I mean, how unique is that? And what is it that about India that brings both parties together uniquely or somewhat uniquely in this lane?
This is not a simple thing that we're facing down. Realize that Prime Minister Modi is extremely nationalistic in a good way. I mean, he's looking after his country just like we look after our country. He wants to bring productivity and expansion and technologies to his country. He wants the military to be built up inside of his country. Matter of fact, there's several laws that kind of inhibit our collaborating that are troublesome to the advancement of their military as well as our collaboration. But I understand why he's doing it. If you understand his motivations, if you understand some of the things that frustrate us when they buy cheap Russian oil. It basically funds a war in Ukraine. We hate that. But he's doing it for the best interest of his country so he can expand his economy with cheap energy. So there's a lot of economical reasons that he's going to do what he's going to do. But in the end, I think he understands how important we are because we are like-minded. And because when we collaborate, when you have 250,000 Indian students here right now in America, right now, but we also have 250,000 Chinese students in America right now. We have 1 million total. The industry that we bring back to India, the consumption that we do of Indian goods is very important, but we need to make sure there's balance there, that there's equal buy-in. And it's not going to be perfectly balanced. Anybody who's married understands that, but some better than others. But I think understanding that it is a collaboration and that there does have to be a fairness, an open market to both, where we have a capitalistic synergy. And I think that's a complex issue. And when you talk about the president and his leverage, he has to use our leverage because we are their biggest consumer. We're the world's biggest consumer. We have a $30 trillion economy. India is not even past Germany yet. They're about 400. I think they just passed Japan, but they're coming up on Germany, and they're going to blow by Germany. And then they're going to advance on China. But China's been crushing it since about 2015 when they came out with the Made in China initiative. They've been cheating their way to the top through the World Trade Organization, which we gave in good faith, and they've abused. We want to make sure that India stays in line with good economics, good faith, and good relationships that it doesn't become an abusive relationship on either side. But there's always going to be leverage done with the president, and some presidents leverage more than others.
Well, Congressman Bera, you come from a constituency that actually is pretty bipartisan as well. You've got a lot of from both major parties. So when you're back home and you think of this bipartisanship, like, is there a difference between Democrats, Republicans in your district and how they think about the India relationship and your long-term leadership here?
No, I'm a Californian, so our state's an export economy-driven state, so it's a real important market for us to open up. And there's obviously throughout California, there's a huge Indian diaspora, tech sector in Silicon Valley, a number of chancellors and so forth. So it's a big diaspora in California. So it's important on a state-to-state level. Governor Newsom's made some headway in reaching out to Indian states as well. So it's easy to explain why India is really important. So I agree with everything Rich said.
Yeah.
It's a good start.
Well, time for the, I think, the big scene setter stuff. Congressman McCormick talking about the economic relationship. I think we saw when Prime Minister Modi was first elected, India wanting to rebuild a manufacturing industry, and you saw a lot of protectionism that was brought about, which was challenged pretty aggressively by President Trump last time and again this time. But both of our countries want to be great in semiconductors and autos and so many other areas. How do you find that kind of middle ground where we can both grow together? What does that look like in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's happened to some degree anyways. We've divested from China, and India's picking up the slack in many of the production lines. That whole region is also, Vietnam, Thailand, you're seeing Cambodia trying to step in right now, but also the relationship with China makes that confounded in some ways. But India, I think, has, once again, a unique ability because of their population, 1.47 billion people. I mean,
1.4 billion.
That's crazy. It's the biggest, it's blown by China. China's shrinking, India still is expanding. India's one of only two places in the world that's still expanding as a population. Everybody else, we've reached a plateau in the Earth's population. And you'll see a decline over time, I think, if Africa could ever get a hold of their population. India and Africa are the only two places where we're really expanding by any kind of noticeable. Everybody else is declining dramatically. So whereas the population still matters, talent really matters. And India is supplying a tremendous amount of talent to the entire world, not just in exporting talented people, but also in what they're filling. Look, they just put a spaceship on the dark side of the moon for under $80 million, not billion, $1 million. We can't even build a building to talk about putting a spaceship on the dark side of the moon for that much. They're just becoming extremely, it's kind of like jumping past telephone poles and going straight to cellular. They have some real advantages in the way they're approaching businesses right now. And people should be very, not concerned, but very aware of that so that we can work synergistically. We embrace them as friends, we usher in that peace, that prosperity for the rest of the world. If we alienate them, it's going to be big trouble for all of us. And I mean that sincerely. Big trouble for them too, quite frankly, but we have to lead the way. We are still the world leader. We will set the bar for that relationship. And everything that President Trump or President Biden or anybody else who's going to be president, I hope they put that at the top of their strategic priority list.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I would just expand on what Rich was saying. I was in India in September at a time of pretty high friction, right? The president made some comments about Pakistan. I had invited Pakistani leaders into the Oval Office. I left on a Friday, landed on Saturday, and were hit with the $100,000 H-1B visa issue, so that took up a lot, 50% tariff. So there was a lot of friction points. But the truth is, when you talk to the business community, they're playing the long game here. They get it. Even my individual conversations with government leaders and so forth, they get it. And look, we're not creating a strategic partnership with Pakistan. You don't see American companies making multi-billion-dollar investments in Pakistan. That's all happening in India. I went to Western Naval Command because we should talk about the Indian Ocean region as well. And that's an important place where we were a little bit slow in the Pacific Islands. In South China Sea, we can't make that same mistake in the Indian Ocean region. India will be critical in keeping the peace, maritime security, freedom of navigation in that region as well. They get it. We're playing the long game. There's some hiccups here, but we'll get through this.
Interesting you mentioned Pakistan too. People don't realize that they have almost 300 million people in their country too, but they don't bring the investment here and vice versa too. So India is not only taking investment, they're also giving investment. And to watch them kind of grow as a nation and actually spread their wings and start to establish themselves as a dominant country in in a lot of regions. I think as they develop, you'll see that huge middle class just coming to bear on the world market. I think it's going to be impressive.
Yeah, despite the frictions between the capitals, you still see the high-frequency data on trade and investment still show a real uptick. So, it hasn't yet hit the real world quite as much as you might kind of expect so far in the tension. And hopefully trade agreements, some other things happen, and we can get back on the upside. But, shifting over, Congressman Bera, to the security relationship, you've engaged India deeply on that topic as well. When you think about India for its own regional security as a net security provider for the region, for the Indian Ocean, what does that look like to you, and how can the United States think about our partnership with India in military affairs in the years ahead?
Yeah, so the defense-to-defense space has always been one that's been on a good trajectory. Some of them make it in India. You see a lot of our major defense companies producing in India. There are issues that we have to work through, export controls, things like that, but those are workable issues. The Quad is another one that, I think foundationally that's important, both from an economic but a geopolitical security perspective, the United States, Japan, India, and Australia. And I think that increasingly will take on a bigger role. And the reason I know the Quad's so important is because Beijing hates it.
That's a pretty good sign. Congressman McCormick, from thinking about making this economic relationship really kind of two-way, more investment to the United States, improving U.S. exports. When you're back home in the district, you're meeting with companies, how big do they talk about that economic promise and opportunities? Does Indian investment in your district come up as something aspirational? Is it not yet on the radar screen? So I wonder if you could talk about the two-way nature and where we can go to in that part of the relationship.
So the immigrant population in my district focuses more on tech and healthcare, right? We have 1 out of every 5 doctors in my district is from India. We have a ton of IT. FinTech is central to my district. It's got 70% of the United States FinTech is centered in my district. So a huge amount of IT. We're right next to Georgia Tech, one of the leading AI development centers in America. We actually have 2 columns of AI development out of 15 in the nation are right there at Georgia Tech. It's phenomenal. But it goes far beyond that, opening the market to agriculture. India, most people don't realize, actually, it's self-sufficient for agriculture, which is impressive for a country of over 1.4 billion people. But that doesn't mean it's balanced. It doesn't mean it's great nutrition. And to open up the markets to our ag is actually our biggest export in Georgia. And to be able to export whatever we have, whether it be pecans, peanuts, whatever it is, we want to make sure that we have that availability. It's a fair market. No barriers there, no barriers here. And I think that's what started this whole idea of tariffs. At first it was supposed to be just reciprocal, and now it's going to be something just to have access to our huge market. But I'm a fair trade guy. I'm actually a guy who believes that tariffs are antithetical to capital growth. And I think I will always stick to that. I'm the capitalist of capitalists. As Coolidge said 100 years ago, one of my favorite presidents of all time, he was a minimalist when it came to government because he believed it was a necessary evil, but you stay out of the way of people, because people are what drive this economy. And when we have great intentions as a government, we're going to make a law, it's going to be great. No, it's not. Usually laws make it worse on people. Quite frankly, there's tons of bad laws out there we can't get off the books because we can't come to an agreement on the bad things we have. But if you think about what Coolidge said 100 years ago, he said, the business of America is business. It doesn't matter if you're talking about immigration, trade, laws. Everything you do should be around the idea that you're going to create a profitable environment, not to pollute the environment, but a profit, because polluting is not profitable either, by the way. But if you think about what's good for business, it's good for people. Upward mobility. Nobody feels good about themselves sitting at home getting supported by the government. That doesn't help with your depression, your anxiety, your suicidality, your drug and alcohol. As an ER doc, believe me, those people are sad. Create an environment where you have the ability to go do any job and get a better job next week, and you'll be happy. And I think when we talk about our relationship to India, their ability to thrive is the same as ours. As we have a synergistic relationship, you'll see this amazing opportunity for both countries. Tariffs can inhibit that somewhat, and I want to make sure it's never punitive.
Rich is an ER doctor, so he triages the patient. I'm an internist, so then I take care of the patient, cure the patient.
I'm the safest guy in the world right now, too, with these two on stage if I have a sudden cardiac event.
Yeah, I agree with Rich. I tend to be a free trade, fair trade individual as well. The agricultural piece is just difficult with India, right, because of the subsistence farmers and so forth, and you've seen the protests in India. Yeah, I do hope we get a trade deal, that ever elusive trade deal that seems close I think it's important that we get that trade deal. And I'd love to see zero tariffs on both sides.
Yeah. I think for for a lot of basic agriculture, India's got a hard hand.
Yeah.
For a lot of unique products, and I think nuts and fruits and vegetables, there's a lot more space there, and hopefully, we can start opening up some of those markets.
Almonds from California.
Yeah. Congressman Bera, you mentioned briefly, and I'll ask for both your opinions on in terms of the Quad. I mean, this across again multiple administrations now has really become one of the defining vehicles for improving U.S. India security cooperation, not military cooperation per se, but at least security cooperation, both for helping the four countries themselves, but then coming together to provide benefit across the Indo-Pacific. So, the Quad has maybe a skinny down agenda so far under Trump 2.0, but we're hoping to have a Quad, senior meeting coming up pretty soon. How do you hope for the Quad to kind of evolve today and in the future?
Yeah, I think it's really important for President Trump to be there and attend the Leaders Summit in the Quad, which has moved a couple times. I think for his relationship with Prime Minister Modi, and if you were to go back 12 months ago, like they had a real, what at least externally looked like it was going to be a really close relationship and get a lot done. You did Howdy Modi, where President Trump in Houston, and Namaste Trump in Ahmedabad. So again, you would have guessed the trajectory would have gone a lot smoother. Obviously, a few hiccups here and there, but I think if the president's there, that'll be a big signal.
Yeah, but programmatically, are there things you want to see the Quad doing in the future that maybe it isn't, or things that they should?
I mean, programmatically, we started the Quad Caucus here in Congress as well to in a bipartisan way to be supportive of it. I do think you're seeing it at the leaders level, and I'd actually like us to, at the legislative level, to get parliamentarians from India, Japan, and Australia to meet, and we could move around once a year where we could go to Australia, or go to Delhi, go to Tokyo, come to Washington D.C. because administrations are here for 4 or 8 years. This is my 14th year in Congress, so those relationships amongst legislators are incredibly important because then we can play the long game. We can work through these issues. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
I think, too, it's important to understand the historical reference when you talk about the Quad. And don't forget about I2U2, which is India, Israel, United States, and UAE, which is equally important, intriguing, if nothing else. May not is important, but at least intriguing. It's think about the diversity of those four nations. But what's interesting about the Quad, and I would throw South Korea in there to an extent, and also Thailand, some very old allies we have. But if you think about the regional advantages of Australia and Japan historically, since World War II, Japan's benefited tremendously from the United States. We basically built up their entire economy. We made them a juggernaut, even more so than before World War II. We supported them in a way that they didn't even need a military. Now they're going to have a military because of China. Australia has fought world wars with us. They've been so close to us. They're much like Great Britain. They're an old ally. India's a new relationship, really. If you think about it, they had a strong relationship with Russia because that whole Pakistani-India thing. This is new, and so we're still filling each other out a little bit. But I think the Prime Minister Modi has been so good at, first of all, being a deep thinker, being very level-headed, being very popular. I mean, I think he's the most popular politician in modern history by far. Probably the most popular guy since...
After Rich McCormick.
since Gandhi, probably. And I remember when we were talking to him in India, and he said he doesn't trust any politician that hasn't rode the train from south to north or north to south in coach. So you can experience the diversity of India, which is as equally as diverse as we are. And I'm talking about religiously, politically, ethnically, language. We have so many similarities in the sense that he has to govern this really diverse culture, which puts him in the same mindset as us. China is very monolithic in its approach to everything. So is Japan. The United States and India have to think similar in the way that we approach our population, which is very different and has a lot of different ideas of where we should go, but they both have a very capitalistic approach, which I think is beneficial to the way we see the world.
Yeah. Congressman McCormick, going back to kind of high-tech issues, you've not just been a leader on India, but a leader on artificial intelligence. India's hosting the big global AI summit. I think we're both going to be out there. When you think about cooperation in those leading-edge high-tech areas, the United States has looked at compute export controls, things like that. Where does India kind of fit in? Like, what does partnership look like in some of these really robust emerging tech areas where you've also been a leader?
Actually, this is a really important topic. I talked to Jensen He's got this little small company called NVIDIA. You'll hear about it.
He was here in the building a few weeks ago, yeah.
We were just talking about this last week, as a matter of fact. We're texting back and forth on some posts we've done recently because the India market, if you think about it, they're either going to rely on us or China. They don't have the infrastructure ability by themselves. If we start limiting access to our products, that's going to be bad for us as a country. We won't be the standard. We have to make sure we don't limit our ability. And that doesn't mean we give away all of our top secret stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. But if we limit our good chips to the rest of the world, they'll get them from somewhere else. Maybe not as good as ours, but then they become the standard. And so we got to make sure that market stays open, that it stays fair, that we're not having these reciprocal tariffs that force the price point up and make our product unaffordable, that we don't start hoarding those things and then end up on the outside of all those developing countries, not just India, but the entire Eastern Pacific, which China is really competing for us. And even that goes over to the Western Hemisphere. We just talked about Venezuela. The Chinese influence there has been far exceeding ours for a long time. Brazil is another concern for me. Colombia is another concern. Obviously, Cuba. We have to make sure we're allowing our products to get out there in a fair market way and to encourage that so we are the industry standard. I can't stress that enough. And all these state legislators, and this is why I think it's really important that we codify that we don't have states. I'm a federalist. I believe in state rights as much as anybody. But this is interstate and international trade. It's really important that we don't inhibit ourselves from progressing and being non-competitive in the world market. This is why I think this should be bipartisan. Yeah. If any, this is about our survival. This is the most transformative technology that we've ever seen in our lifetime. And we've got to be on the right side of history.
Yeah, let's write the bill, right? I mean, I think industry wants us to put those guardrails up, and we can't have 50 different guardrails. We've got to have a single guardrail. If I just expand, Rich alluded to India's importance on the world stage. And one area where, again, when I was in India in the fall talking to the government officials, where I think they have a real opportunity, and also to build a relationship with President Trump. President Trump, I think, genuinely wants to end the conflict in Ukraine, I think. India does have lines of communication and a deeper history with Putin, with Russia. India could play a constructive role both in helping get to some resolution here. And I think, India is now an important country. This could be a real opportunity for the Indians. But the real question we haven't talked enough about is the what next with Russia. Once this conflict's over, do you just forgive all the sins of Putin and let him back in? We don't want to keep him isolated. Again, I think that's really where India's role could also be extremely instrumental. And that is something that we spend time thinking about the day after. Because again, and this is India's moment to test its global diplomatic chops.
That's a difficult topic too, I will say. It's funny, we have people in both sides of the house that are becoming increasingly isolationist in one way or another. I'm totally against that. I think anybody who's looked at isolationism, it never has been the answer to anything. As a matter of fact, it's a death sentence for a country's economy and for your influence around the world. China, ironically, used to have the best economy in the world back in the 15th century. They circumnavigated the world before Magellan. They had the largest economy by far. Their economy, technology, and trade exceeded all of Europe combined. And then they became isolationists and became inconsequential until recently. We have to make sure we don't go that same route. I personally believe that Russia is only important because they do remain germane to the rest of the world. They do get involved in everybody's politics. They have a GDP of $2.1 trillion. Texas has $2.7 trillion. California's even bigger.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
But I will say this. They don't have to be a world power in the way that they project. But I think this is where we have to be careful that we don't confound GDP. Already India has over twice the size of a GDP of Russia. They can literally set the boundaries for Russia themselves. They are probably Russia's biggest consumer of goods and literally can affect the future where they can punish Russia independently of the United States and form their political destiny and how it affects the rest of the world. By nature, tell me, I'm only 2% Indian, but they're fairly pacifistic as far as they're not aggressive people. They're not trying to create an imperial empire. and they want to see world peace. And I've been disappointed. I've expressed my disappointment to the ambassador. I said, why would you support anything that funds the war? Why? We should be crushing Russia. Europe has 10 times the economy of Russia, and we are bigger than Europe by a time and a half. Combined, we have a $50 trillion economy. We should be crushing Russia, just economically, let alone militarily. We would not put any troops there. And I think India will have a big part to play once they see we come in their own and they're not so reliant on Russia, and that means we have to step to the plate to produce them the energy that they need so they don't have to consume it somewhere else. But once they have more options, that will help us with world peace, I think.
Congressman Bera, I guess having two positions on stage, you think about the utility of AI. Yeah. Is there ways that you think about AI for provision of healthcare, things like that, where not just in terms of developing AI tools, not just in terms of is India going to have access to the compute, but is this something that we can use together to kind of unlock capabilities for the global south and others? Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, I agree with Rich that AI is going to be a transformational technology. We're going through this very rapidly, and the United States and India should work incredibly closely together to both advance AI, solve challenges that are going to emerge, and then work together through that. Bring in Japan, bring in Korea, bring in other like-valued allies. It's also an opportunity for us to rethink what visas look like, right? So we're holding on to a broken H-1B visa system that really didn't work before. President Trump's disrupted that a little bit. And we have had some conversations. Can we create corridors around problems that we want to solve or opportunities? So AI could be one of those where you have the workers moving back and forth, our workers moving there, their workers coming here. I think that is one we could do in a bipartisan way, rethinking that around specific areas and creating a new visa category. Because these are not the folks that Stephen Miller should be worrying about overstaying their visas. These are high-skilled folks that are moving back and forth. And the other aha when I was in India last was a lot of the folks that are coming here, they used to come here to get their education, start their companies here. They see how fast the Indian domestic market is growing. It is a lot easier for those young entrepreneurs to go back to India, do proof of concept, you've got the workers there, and develop their companies there because those are fast-growing domestic markets. So they don't have to be here, and in fact, they can move back and forth. And again, if you want to work on that one together, we could think about a different visa category.
This is absolutely paramount. The United States gets away from the antiquated immigration system we have. First of all, you know the controversy we have, obviously. We don't have enough immigrants in certain areas, but it fluctuates every year based on demand. It used to be we need a tremendous amount of talent from India on tech. AI has really replaced that entry-level thing, and that's why a lot of people, now this is a bipartisan issue because actually Democrats and Republicans are both a little bit miffed about the H-1B visa process actually replacing entry-level jobs for college kids. And so we need to adapt. It needs to adjust every year. And that's not just in technology, it's in healthcare, it's in agriculture, it's in hotels, it's in construction, which means that each nation brings different skill sets. I mean, our shipbuilding is so light years behind Korea and Japan and China. Light years behind. We are so far behind. And that is strategically a really soft spot in America. And that's just one area we need to look at immigration. But if you have 1 million students here every year, and you're only keeping a fraction of that talent, we need to look at our education. I mean, the three biggest things I think, as far as we as a bipartisan group need to look at, education, which we're hamstrung. We don't put enough kids in STEM education. We don't encourage people. We don't use our AI to actually develop students with ideal situations. We could literally design a custom-made classroom for every student in the United States, cheaper than what we have already. That's where we're at right now, but we're just resisting change, which is, unfortunately, we're just like everybody else. There's two things Americans hate. We hate the way things are, and we hate change. and so we have this dichotomy, this problem of developing the three things we have: education, healthcare, and debt are the three things that are going to hamstring us into the future. But coming to a consensus right now, and this is the political climate we live in, a lot of people were focused on the issue rather than on the solution, and that's not helpful. And so I think as we get to bipartisan, here's the cool thing, and this is why it's really good to have a bipartisan panel here where we're in agreement on 99% of everything, is only the things that we're bipartisanly going to agree on are going to pass. All the rest is superfluous. It's distraction. Anything that divides my party or divides his party we might as well not even talk about. It's just fluff. It's clickbait. But if we want to talk about things that are actually going to make a difference, the only things that are going to pass in this extremely 50-50 Congress and Senate and presidency is going to be, I guarantee the next presidency race is going to be razor thin again, and realize that President Trump won by 49.9% of the popular vote, which means just like Bill Clinton, it's razor thin. I mean, it's been like that for decades now. So only the things we agree on are going to come to reality. And that's why it's really important that we work together on things that will be transformative for the future of America.
Well, let's talk about the diaspora and Hill engagement. Actually, we got some great folks, Sanjeev within Diaspora and Suresh with Pan IIT. I mean, there's been a lot of groups that have really tried to kind of channel that energy. But, Congressman Bera, you've been on the Hill for a while, and I imagine you got to be one of the first stops, even apart from your constituents. How has that evolved over time? And are there things the diaspora could be doing different to be kind of engaged, topics or other ways?
Yeah, I mean, a number of things. When I first got elected in 2012, I was only an Indian American member of Congress. And today there's 6 of us, right?
7.
So, well, 7. So it's 2%. Honorary member of the Samosa Caucus, Rich. So you've seen that. You've seen political engagement mature in the diaspora. My parents immigrated in the 1950s, so I grew up, it was a very small diaspora. And I'm a good Indian kid. I went to medical school and then decided to run for Congress.
Was that approved or not? Or family approved that change?
They thought I was nuts when I said I was going to run for Congress. Like, you're going to do what? But now you see folks, we've had governors, we've had state elected, a lot of state legislators, mayors. So that's coming, right? The diaspora that was born and raised here absolutely sees that they've got a seat at the table, and that's a good thing. So I think that'll engage the diaspora. For the diaspora that immigrated here, they kind of keep your head down, start your business, build your community, don't attract attention to yourself. So I think that evolution's occurring in quite a natural way. Part of the design of doing the bipartisan resolution codifying why the U.S. India relationship was important is so we could actually give these groups like Diaspora and others something that they could actually take around to their members of Congress to say, hey, we'd like you to co-sponsor this. I think that's the next piece of lobbying that needs to occur. I've tried for 14 years to figure out, okay, what drives the Indian American diaspora. There's not one thing. It's not like Israel, where the Jewish American diaspora can rally around Israel. We're an incredibly diverse group of individuals, as Rich has already pointed out, and you might see that change over time. You did see it around the civil nuclear deal, where I think that's the one time the diaspora really did come together to get that passed back in the Clinton era.
Yeah, we had the same, I see Ray Vickery in the front row here too, with removing the sanctions after the nuclear test. A couple of times the diaspora stood up, but it's got to be really unique, really powerful, and with a very specific target, I think. But for folks in the audience, we're going to come to questions, but you see we got a QR code up there, so it gets launched on the iPad. So if you do have questions, we're not going to take it directly. We're going to have it, because I'm grouping a lot of questions that are brought up here. But Congressman McCormick, I wonder if you can touch on the same. You've got a relatively high percentage of Indian Americans in your district, as you pointed out early. Is there specific things they ask for that are kind of unique to the diaspora, or most of the ask, frankly, the same things that you hear from a lot of your constituents?
So the big frustration, of course, is going to be the immigration policy. For a long time, that's been broken. Because everything else, they're excelling, right? We don't have a problem with making money. We don't have a problem with opportunity. But you have people here who are literally growing up as kids, getting to age 21, and then being deported because they follow the law, right? And that's not fair, because now you're going to a country you've never been a part of. You may not even speak the language. You're as American as anybody who's ever been here. And that's not creating a very good system. We have such a problem with immigration policy. We submitted an H-1B visa modification last year that I thought was very fair and balanced. It was going to give pathway to people who've been here for 20 years. Right? Literally, if you come here on a visa, it could take you over 20 years now because of the backlog. Because remember, there's a 7% cap per country. Well, when you're the biggest country with the most immigrants here, that's not going to help you become a citizen. It's going to put a cap on you unfairly, even though you've been waiting in line, following the laws, doing everything right. We need to do something better, and we need to retain our talent. Like you said, 250,000 people being sent back to India to compete with us. We need to retain some of that talent. That's really important. And we need to make sure we're very smart about how we do it. It has to make sense for America too, right? We can't replace our own students. We have to encourage our students not to just say, okay, well, we're going to be replaced by these students. We have to have a competitive market and maybe even limit China and limit other countries that are competing against us in nefarious ways to show that we mean business, that we want people who see the world the same way we do. That's the kind of immigration reform we need to be smart about. And that's going to take a lot of thinking and agreeing. And by the way, that cannot go from one party. It can't. It will be unsuccessful. First of all, it'll never pass the Senate. And secondly, it won't be a balanced, smart approach. There's a few things that we just can't be partisan on. I wish healthcare would be one of those. Unfortunately, it's not. But there are common sense solutions to things that we have not solved yet, that we don't have anything new in the books on. The Affordable Care Act, historically, is pretty new. It's going to be very hard to correct because it's become so politicized, which is unfortunate. That's why we had such a problem with COVID. It became politicized. It's why we have problems with racial relationships, because you politicize it. If you didn't make it political, it'd be pretty easy to solve, actually. And that's what we're trying to fight in these bipartisan groups that actually see the world in a way that's realistic and beneficial to everyone.
Okay, good. So,
Rich is alluding to documented dreamers, which is a nonpartisan issue. So you've had bills that have been bipartisan in both the House and Senate, and it is one that we should get done.
Congressman Bera, so you're an active member of this relatively new India congressional study group on India.
Yeah.
You've been involved with others in the past as well. Like, what can we kind of expect to see from study groups? What are the sort of things they can do to kind of prompt Congress into looking at new things, new directions?
Yeah, so I'm the co-chair of the Congressional Study Group on Korea, but for a long time have been advocating that there should be one on India as well. And what's unique about the study groups that's different than other congressional CODELs is that you focus on one country. So, and you bring a different group of members to that particular country every year. So Deborah Ross from North Carolina, Rob Whitman from Virginia are going to be the two co-chairs of the study group, and the inaugural trip will go out in February. But it gives you the opportunity to take members who may have never been to India, may not have a big diaspora, to do a real deep dive in understanding the opportunities, challenges, and culture of a place. So we do that on Korea, and again, this February will be the inaugural study group. And they're run through the former members of Congress, so a lot of support.
Yeah. I saw that they just posted hiring, so they're going to bring somebody on, former members of Congress, to actually staff this. So for anybody in the audience or people that are watching too, there's a great India policy job out there that can help to support this great work that Congressman Bera brought up. Congressman McCormick, we talked just briefly about Russia, about China. You see India dancing with groups that we would consider adversarial. Mm-hmm. Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS. At the same time, India is signing substantive agreements with a lot of our partners and friends. UK trade agreement, New Zealand trade agreement, things like that. How do you look at that kind of balance on India's relationships with, groupings that are sort of anti-Quad versus those that, friends and partners to the United States? Like, how much should we hold India accountable for the bad rooms they show up in versus the partnership they got with others and with friendly countries?
Well, as far as the opportunistic zone, I think the entire world is interested in India. It's an emerging market. It's a fast-growing economy. In the last 15 years, I think it's been China, India, and Poland are dominating. Now, Poland's extremely, so it's just kind of a drop in the bucket when it comes to population, but as far as just, you can see the policies that benefit countries. What worries me, there is so many complexities that we can get wrong very quickly. And when you see India's look at the Arunachal region, which they've been fighting over for decades now, and they've actually fought with sticks and stones, and it's crazy. And there's also trade disputes, and there's land disputes and all that stuff like that. And yet, Prime Minister Modi went to China right before their big parade. And I understand I don't think he stayed for the parade, but I was worried. I was like, wait a minute, that's not, but this is right about the time, the contentious time that we're talking about.
Right.
And I was worried that we're seeing a shift in world politics that would be really worrisome, because if you have the two largest world populations combined, it's almost 3 billion people. And the economic power behind that could shift the whole idea of a free market society of India over towards more of a socialistic, which I think would be extremely, once you start having a political debate over that sort of governing, it could be catastrophic, because that could literally create a world order that's contrary to our idea of what modern society should be based on, what benefits people, what I think has been benefiting people for hundreds of years. So it's important we guard that relationship, that we sacrifice for that relationship, which is a hard thing to say. We don't like to talk about that sometimes. Sometimes this is where it comes into I'm never going to get a bill, when we work together, we're never going to get a bill where I get everything I want. That's government. And yet we're so much in this fist guy. I'm an extremely conservative guy. but I'm also very realistic that I'm not going to get my way. Even when we pass a CR, I'm like, I hate CRs, but guess what? We kept the government open. And I know that's good for the people. So we do things we don't want to do sometimes because it's the only thing we do. And that includes with our relationship with India. Sometimes we have to take a more pragmatic approach to this so that we can actually look into the future to something that keeps them away from bad actors, in my opinion. And that's multifaceted.
I hate CRs as well, but playing off, I get Prime Minister Modi has his own domestic politics that he has to deal with, and I think it's really important that Ambassador Gore is in country now because he's going to have a direct line to the president. They obviously have a close relationship. You're going to have a lead diplomat in country now, and President Trump has made some comments, probably unintentionally, maybe intentionally. At times he does like to be provocative at times.
You think? Really?
Newsflash.
That should be a headliner somewhere.
That has caused tension, and that Prime Minister Modi then has to. We're politicians. You've got to respond to your electorate and your domestic politics. We got to move past that. And again, a real strong. India historically has been a non-aligned country, and they're going to try to hold on to that. In the 21st century world, that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to play all sides, especially with a neighbor like China. I don't think India wants to be China's little brother. And join countries that share similar values of democracy, of free markets, of opportunity, of prosperity, to come together. And if we do this correctly, as Rich alluded to, we can create an architecture for the 21st century so our children and grandchildren can have the same peace and prosperity that we grew up with.
One big advantage we have is we have a whole lot more Indian immigrants here than they do in China.
Yeah.
And that does help, I think.
Yeah. It really is great. I mean, we do a lot of work, as I was saying beforehand, subnationally, and you go to state governments in India and folks that you meet with and try to engage with, they got kids here, they studied here. That connectivity on people to people, it really is incredible, not just on this side, but on that side as well. It really provides some unique and powerful bridges. Had a question come in about defense cooperation and the role that Congress can play. Maybe Congressman Bera, we'll start with you. We want to see India continue the pace of drawing down its defense buys from Russia.
Yeah.
Buying from the United States is great. Buying from friends and partners is pretty good. Domestic is certainly better than at least buying it all from Russia. Are there roles that you think Congress can play in trying to accelerate that and help move that needle a little bit faster in ways that India would find comfortable and interesting?
And we have, right? So in Trump 1.0, we gave them a CATSA waiver, and we recognize that they've got a lot of Russian equipment, and they've got to maintain that equipment, and they're not just going to stop on a dime and stop. But if the trend is moving towards us, they certainly pre-October 7th had a strong defense relationship with Israel as well, and Korea is starting to ramp up its defense production lines. We want them to keep moving in our direction. We want to continue doing more joint exercises, joint training, joint development. That was very clear when I was at Western Naval Command, that they're very much interested in continuing to partner with the United States and look at interoperability and all of that. That's where we're going. I mean, I think India knows that as well. Rich already pointed out, Russia's not a rising power. It's a dying power. Putin's going to do everything he can to hold on, but that's not where the future of the world lies. And it's not going to be India and China. They recognize that as well. So this is where it's going. Let's accelerate that. And I think that's where Congress can play a role, is helping accelerate that co-production. We'll have to work, again, they have to work through their procurement issues and just the complexity of Indian bureaucracy. They want us to work through export controls and technologies and things like that we can share with them.
This is a really important thing to realize. I'm going to tip our hand a little bit here. Our technologies have not kept up in the defense industry. That's why you'll see your Andurils and your Palantirs rising up, and your big four who are still based on antiquated systems of contracting, even where you had 10 years to R&D, 10 years to incorporate, 10 years to sustain. Those days are gone. Technologies are changing so dramatically every year. That's why I say big difference when you're Indian, you're coming in, you didn't have to go through the telephone pole era. You can go straight to digital.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous advantage. You're seeing companies in Brazil pop up that are competing with the C-130, which has been around for decades with us, but everything's automated. It's like we have people building furniture with machines, and they're competing with the old guys who still have workers doing it, and they're getting crushed because they're still based on it. That's why Blockbuster went away. We have got to do a much better job of advancing. Otherwise, actually, India, and this is Prime Minister Modi's ultimate goal, is to be independent as a defense contractor. Matter of fact, they have laws on the books right now that says any new industry in defense can't be developed there with anything less than 51% India ownership. So they want ownership. They want responsibility. They have technology. They're getting good at this, and they're going to get better at it. Israel is another one. They've taken the reins, and actually they're ahead of us in certain things. We have to realize that China's done very well, and they're ahead of us on a couple things. There's always going to be the checks and balances, and the United States still has by far the biggest investment in military. I mean, Trump just announced that he wants to be at 1.5 trillion, which I actually applaud, as long as it's not wasteful spending, which is very important to me. I don't want to be based on an antiquated system where we just keep on crushing it through a bottleneck that doesn't work. We have to re-innovate how we come about these technologies and how we apply it and produce it. Because 1.5 trillion doesn't matter if you're still doing it the old way and you're wasting, in the case of the Air Force, the majority of your budget's going towards antiquated systems. I don't need 1.5 trillion worth of antiquated systems. India realizes that. They want the best products. Now, hopefully, what just happened in Venezuela points out the fact Russia probably doesn't have the leading technology in most things. But they do have some very good stuff. They're very good at drones. So is Iran. So is China. Our three biggest competitors, and drones are the future in many ways. Drone and anti-drone technologies, navigation systems, hypersonic technologies, radar systems, all those things they're very good at. And so we have to very much pay attention to India, understand that the entire government understands what the leading edge technologies are, and they're investing. They don't have the GDP to invest like we do, but they are getting there. And like I said, look what they did with that spaceship, the Dark Side of the Moon, and you'll get just a taste of what they're thinking of. And remember, 250,000 students right here are training to be the future competitors or synergistic partners in the future.
Yeah. Anyone want to add?
You know, I would. I agree with the reason why these bipartisan things are so important is all of you can see that we actually agree on most things. We just have to work through the politics and all of that to get to 218 votes. I think an advantage India has vis-a-vis China is a decade ago, 2 decades ago, China allowed their entrepreneurs to create and innovate, and Beijing, Xi Jinping has crushed that entrepreneurial spirit. Indians, by its very nature, are very entrepreneurial, and you see that when you talk to young people in India and so forth. That's rising. That's only getting faster, and it's in our interest, the United States' interest, to have that partnership, because if you can solve some of these issues in India, so Rich alluded to cell phones. They're not going to build an electrical grid the way we did. We have these legacy issues that are going to be really hard for us to shed. He talked about some of the defense production lines. They are going to jump to the next technology. And we ought to learn from that, because then we ought to say, hey, they're doing it this way. Let's bring that back to the United States, right? So that's why this isn't a one-way street. This is a two-way street where, obviously India's interests align with the United States. Our interests align with India's, though, as well.
I'm smiling because when I went to India last time, I took the It's a Small World tour through the temple where you could see all the technologies that were developed. And if you went through that, you'd be like, gosh, everything was invented in India. We're the first dentists, first astrologers, first doctors, first operation, first, we invented chess. I was like, okay, so what's left over in the rest of the world? It was hilarious. But no, innovation runs deep in that history. And so I was just kind of
We'll have to go visit the Baps Temple in New Jersey. That's supposed to be bigger.
I love the startup collaboration, because I think that's one of the challenges I saw in trying to stoke defense cooperation early in the days. Big U.S. defense contractors not willing to part with tech to help India kind of stand up. But if you get your entrepreneurs working together, co-create that technology rather than trying to share. The last question I had that came in, which kind of flows from that pretty well, it sounds like a dull, dry topic on data. But ultimately, it is kind of the underpinning. I mean, for India, this vibrant IT service industry that's really been such a driver in commercial relationships. And as we try to bring India and pack silica, do co-development of new technologies, the ability to move data is really important. So, what's the sense of Congress right now for data collaboration with our partners? Are there concerns? Are there edges barriers we want to put around it? Or is it lanes wide open for partners like India when it comes to data sharing? Because it's such an underpinning of all these technology areas we've been talking about.
There's always going to be data sharing concerns with any country. Right. Even our closest friends, I think the only countries we really are open with is Great Britain and Australia. I mean, after that, it's a very short list. because of the concerns of how it will be applied or stolen by other countries. That's what's holding us back from full-throated support of Taiwan, quite frankly. I mean, with smart mines and javelins and stingers, you could make that place into a porcupine. It would be almost impossible to penetrate. Because remember, China's never fought a modern war. Now, it doesn't mean they don't have the equipment, but that's a learning curve that's not easy to learn when you're doing amphibious assault. Take it from any Marine. But if you talk about data, even data storage, for example, if you look at the futures of the American market, what's holding up the market is AI storage facilities and data. Oracle, the guy who owns Oracle, basically, he's the richest man in the world, just past Elon Musk. He's buying movie studios and everything. His son is just on a loan. I mean, that is what's going to be dominating. That's why Greenland all of a sudden became very important, because they have tons of water, tons of land, and tons of ability to produce nuclear power plants and everything else that would just fuel the future of data centers and energy, everything else we're going to need, which we've hamstrung ourselves here in America. You know, when you're getting your butt kicked by France, you're in trouble. and France is way ahead of us in nuclear. And so is China, by the way. And they're planning themselves. We have more nuclear reactors, but not for long. And the only state in America that's built nuclear power plants in the next several decades is Georgia. And we only developed 2. So this is really important that we get ahead on this, because there's no way you're going to produce that kind of power from anything other than nuclear. There's no way. You're going to have modular reactors. I think we get to start looking at outside the box thinking, like the old nuclear power cores on ships. Instead of scuttling, taking those out and scuttling the ship, pull them up dry dock, plug them into the grid. Let's see what we can do. We have nuclear engineers already built in. We have a security system already built in. We have to start thinking outside the box, or we're going to fall way behind. And India has a challenge, because right now they're still heavily relying on coal. They don't have the money to develop this infrastructure. So the collaboration between the two countries is going to be huge, and how we face down that problem that's basically us versus the world, or us and India versus China, realistically. That's going to make a difference in how we develop the rest of the AI and data sharing and everything else in the world.
Another nonpartisan issue. I'm a big fan of nuclear, so 3 Mile Island's coming back online as well. But on small modular, we should be working together, right? It's not commercially viable right now, but that's just science. That's just research. We can get there. We do have some, the civil nuclear deal never quite reached fruition. We got a couple issues to work through with the Indians to get there, but we can get through that. We're going to have to figure out energy in the 21st century, and we're going to have to figure out water in the 21st century. Those are 2 huge challenges for India, as Prime Minister Modi's wanted to build out data centers. They don't have enough energy, and they don't have enough water. Right? That's going to be a real challenge for India over this next decade, what they do there. That's why, Rich alluded to I2, U2, India, Israel, United States, and UAE. And we had proposed back in the Biden administration that we focus on desalination. Israel knows how to do it. We know how to do it. The UAE knows how to do it. For those Indians that are listening here and the government, I think that's an area where we ought to work together to help India desalinate water to serve its population. Now, if we can do it there in an affordable way for the Indians, we've got water issues as well. We've got droughts, and we're going to face that ourselves.
Not California.
We can bring that back. Yeah, we run into that. But then we can then take those technologies, co-develop, take them to Africa, where you're seeing huge food insecurity, water insecurity that's leading to political instability.
I2, U2 Quad, you got tech partners, you got money, you got implementing partners, a lot on the table here. Well, Congressman McCormick, Congressman Bera, please, this was such a wonderful opportunity to pick your brain and get the year started off right, but have some aspirational visions for where the partnership is going, and I think some concrete actions that both on the Hill, the administration, the private sector can all take. So please join me in thanking the 2 members of Congress for joining us today. And we'll check back in a year from now. Yeah.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.